In Algebra 1, Section 7.2, we're dealing with factoring by greatest common factors. So, on Chapter 6, you dealt with distributing, okay, and multiplying. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of work backwards. We're going to figure out, instead of multiplying and distributing to each one, we're going to figure out what each term has in common and take it out, okay? For example, if I'm multiplying a times b plus a times c, they both have a in common. So I can actually take a out and put b and c in parentheses. Because if I move backwards, a times b, I still get ab. So it's just this cycle, right? So if I get an equation 4x squared minus 3x, and I did the prime factorization, so I'm factoring everything to its prime, I need to figure out what they have in common. Well, the only thing right now they have in common is an x. So I can take an x, okay, from each one and put the leftovers in the parentheses. 4x is left over in the first term, and then negative 3 is left over in the next term. And it's easy for me to check if I did it right. All I need to do is that if I put this x and I distribute it back, will I get my original? Well, yes. X times 4, x is giving me 4x squared, and x times negative 3 is negative 3x. All right? So let's try it. I'm going to factor this, okay? This is 4 times 2 and 3 x's. Okay? 4 can be primed 2. All right? This one, negative 4, this is negative 1 times 4. Okay? This has its own, the negatives. And then 2 x's. Okay? And then this is negative 16, so I'm going to do negative 1 times 16. The same thing is saying 4, and this is 2, 2, 2, 2, and 1x. So right here, I'm going to see what they have in common. Well, they all have, this has 3 2's, this has 2 2's, that has 4 2's. So they all have at least 2 2's in common. So I'm going to put 2 times 2. This one has at least an x. They have at least one x in common. And this has some things in common with this, and this has some things in common with this. But we're taking out what all three of them have in common. Because when I put it in this form, I need to be able to distribute it back, and it has to be the same for each term. So because of that, everything left over goes into the parentheses. So what's left over here? Well, I took a 2. I have a 2x squared left. Okay, on this one I have a negative 1 and an x. So negative x. And this one I have a negative 1 times 2 times 2. So negative 4. Right? 2 times 2 is 4x. So now I've worked backwards. And this, again, is great because I can easily check by multiplying it back. If I distribute this back into this, 4x times 2x squared, 4 is 8x cubed. Done. Okay? And then 4x times negative x, 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. X times x is x squared, so 4x squared. Negative 4x squared, period. Good. And then 4x times negative 4 gives me negative 16x. Check. So I did factor this correctly. And that's my answer. Now the next one, I don't have to do those steps, but it is there for me to point out something important. If I'm multiplying by the same term here, so we're kind of working backwards from chapter 6 when we're distributing. So if these are exactly the same, I can take these and put them in one parentheses. So I end up with 5 plus 3x parentheses x plus 2. Because remember, if you remember from the other section, when I face something with this, I have to take this term and multiply it by the whole thing, which is what I did here, and then take this whole term and multiply it here. Same thing, okay? So working backwards means I just take these and I can put them in one term, as long as these are exactly the same. If this has an x squared and this, I can't do it. They have to be exactly the same. All right? So the next one, I can go ahead, I can look I know that, let me see. Okay, so this, what I can do is I can break each one down. But when I have 4, I can do something pretty neat. And what I can do is I can find ones that have the most in common and group them. So this is called factoring by grouping, okay? Because this has 3, I have to find what all 3 have in common. I have less of a chance of finding something all 4 of them have in common, but I can take them in pairs. So, for example, 6h to the 4, 6 and 12, I can take out. 6h to the 4 plus 12h, right? And then I can also do I can group negative 4h cubed minus 8. Okay? So I'm going to group that because for this one, if I just focus on these two, I can take out from these two a 6 and I can take an h. If I take out a 6 from here, if I want, I just divide it. If I take out a 6, that leaves me with a 1. And then if I take out an h, it gives me h cubed. Okay? If I take out a 6 from this 12, it leaves me with what? It leaves me with a 2. If I take out an h, I just leave it alone. Right? So h cubed plus 2. Right? And then if I do the same thing here, these both have in common is negative 4. So I'm going to take out a negative 4. And then if I take out a negative 4 from here, I have h cubed. And then if I take out negative 4 here, I have a negative, positive. If I take out a negative from here, I get a positive 4. So positive 2. How do I know if I did that right? I have to multiply it out and check. 6h times h cubed should give me 6h to the 4th. Check. So a 6h times 2 is 12h. Check. Negative 4 times h cubed is negative 4h cubed. Check. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Check. Okay, so you're working kind of backwards. Make sure you check it because it's a little different than what you're used to. Now, I could have, these have something in common, these have something in common, but why did I rearrange them to do that? The reason why I rearranged them to do that is because now if you look, h cubed plus 2h cubed, these are exactly the same. And just like I did last time over there, because they're exactly the same, I can do 6h, I can combine these together, so 6h minus 4, and then h cubed plus 2. And now, this is called factor by grouping. All right? Okay, we can do the same thing over here. Let's find what they have in common. So, I'm not quite sure, so let's try doing these two first. What do these two have in common? Well, they have, I can take out a 2. Now, again, I'm doing this in my head, but you can do this process. In fact, you should this should show your work. If this is not making sense how I'm getting the numbers, all I'm doing is doing this, but I'm doing this part in my head, okay? If I had space, I would do it, but we can go over it in class if you get confused. So I know that I'm only focusing on these two. Remember, I can only do these when there's 4 terms, because when there's 3, there'd be one that's off on its own. Okay, so I have 2x to the third. I can take out a 2. This leaves me with just the 1, and then they both have an x squared that I can take. So then if I take out a 2x squared from this, I end up with just x, and then negative 2 gives me 6. Okay, now I'm going to do it from here. I'm going to take out, I have to decide, now that I have to decide positive or negative. I'm going to take out a positive 3. a negative 3. Here's the reason why. If I take out a negative 3 from 18, then in order for me, negative 3, I do 18 divided by negative 3, because I'm working backwards, I'm not multiplying. I'm doing 18 divided by negative 3, gives me a negative 6. And then taking out a negative 3 here, then negative 3 divided by 3 is positive 1, and then x. Now, it doesn't look the same, but it actually is, right? Because I can rearrange. I just can't add or subtract numbers magically, but I can rearrange, and I'm not breaking any rules. So instead of negative 6 plus x, it's still x minus 6. Now, because this is the same, then I do 2x squared minus 3, and then x minus 6. Okay, so go ahead and try this. Page 467, numbers 16 and 20. 467, numbers 16 and 20, and I will see you in class.